So I'm not saying this to brag, but I was able to maintain a 4.0 GPA throughout Georgia Tech without sacrificing my social life, my dating life, my extracurriculars, or anything else. I lived a very well-balanced life in Georgia Tech, and I was still able to maintain a 4.0 GPA while studying less than most of my classmates. And in this video, what I want to do is share exactly how I did that. I want to give you the framework and the mindset that helped me succeed in this way while still maintaining that balance that I had in school. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Anu. I'm a chemical engineering graduate from Georgia Tech. After graduating in 2024, I spent about 1.5 years in the industry. And what I want to do now through this YouTube channel is share a little bit of the lessons that I've learned during school as well as in the industry. So to start, I want to kind of give you an idea of how I approach learning and studying in general. And I think that starts in the classroom. When I go to lecture, I almost approach it like it's a movie. So when you think about when you're in a movie, or when you're watching a movie, what do? You sit back, you relax, maybe you have a bucket of popcorn, you munch on it, you just relax, right? I don't want to say it's passive. Like, obviously you're paying attention to the movie and you're following the story. So it is kind of an active form of consuming, right? It's an active form of listening. But you're not really thinking too hard about it. You're just kind of letting the pixels on the screen and the light come into your eyes, and you're just kind of enjoying it. You're relaxing. And to me, that's what lecture was like. It was kind of an enjoyable experience. I was just kind of sitting back and letting information come. And sure, I take some notes, but I'll tell you what, anyone who's ever asked me for my notes can tell you too that my notes are chicken scratch. Like, it's complete nonsense and it's a complete mess. You wouldn't want them after the thing. And honestly, I didn't even refer to them. I just kind of took them, kind of like you eat popcorn during a movie. It's just kind of to relax you there. So my notes did the exact same thing. So I'm in lecture and I'm just kind of listening. I'm not trying too hard to like understand it or dissect the deeper meaning or like understand all the equations and everything. I'm just kind of letting things passively come in. I shouldn't say passive. Actively listening and letting it just naturally come in, building that intuition. Then when I got home and I have the homework and the practice problem sets that the professor gave us, that's when I switched to a different mode. Now I'm thinking about things more logically, and I'm actually trying to do something. I'm trying to apply what I've been taught, right? So I am actually now looking through and trying to figure out, okay, how does this make sense? How does this work in the context of the problems that I have? And I would practice those. I would get really good at those problems. And then by the time the test rolls around, I'd practiced it so much, I know the material, and I also have the intuition that from the professor from actively listening to it, that all the tests, it didn't matter what the question was, whether it was a conceptual question or if it was like a practical question where you had to actually challenge yourself and apply the stuff that you learned, I was able to do it no problem. And I got an A on almost every single test that I took. This is the framework that has helped me in school. I have essentially two modes. I have consumption and I have production. And what I see as a problem is when you lean too much in one camp or the other. You're either consuming too much or producing too much. Now, the overconsumption problem, I think we're all pretty familiar with, right? I mean, we live in a day and age where information is almost too readily available for us. We are inundated with so much information and so much knowledge that it's very easy to just overconsume stuff. Now, what does that look like in learning? Overconsumption is you never actually practicing the material. It looks like I'm going to just watch the professor solve problems. I'm going to listen to the lecture, and then rather than actually do the problem myself, I'll just have the professor go through the problem, or I'll watch a guided walkthrough on YouTube of how to do the problem. So you're always in this consumption mindset, and so then when you have to go to the test and you actually have to produce, you're unable to do it. So that's overconsumption. Pretty common problem, and this is actually we know that practice makes perfect. The solution, of course, is just to produce more, practice more. Overproduction is less talked about, but it's also a problem too, because it actually makes it harder to produce because you're skipping the whole consumption phase. And the way I like to think about this is, you remember in literature when you had to annotate texts? I used to hate annotation because I find that you miss the bigger picture for all the little details. Think about what annotation is forcing you to do. It's forcing you to go exit the consumption mode and go to production mode. So you actually have to go into this text and you have to go immediately right into production mode. You have to stop and start and write down thoughts that you have. And it's a slow, laborious process, annotation. And then you finish the passage and you're like, what was the big picture? What's the main point? And you obviously didn't enjoy it, right? I think it's far better to actually consume it first. Like, read through the whole passage first, consume it. And then once you've gotten the big picture and you've gotten a feel for it, then you can go in and like annotate if that's required for your assignment. Or even if like maybe you don't even need to. Maybe the passage is so simple that you can just read through, you get a grasp, and then you can go straight to answering the questions or like moving on with your life. I don't remember any passage that I've ever annotated where I've like annotate first, like I just annotate and I don't actually consume the thing. But I remember movies and books that I've read 10 years ago because I just consumed it. I just let it come in. I just let the intuition come in. And I find so many engineering students, because they're so logical and they're so production minded, which is a good thing most of the time. A lot of people fall in the overconsumption trap, right? But a lot of engineers, I find, go into the overproduction trap. What do is they overproduce. They go to lecture, and instead of just consuming and letting the information come in, they're trying to understand and do something with it right then and there. It's like they're trying to annotate right then and there. Like they're so focused on taking perfect notes and perfectly understanding what the professor is telling them that they just don't consume, and they miss the big picture. They don't understand the details. And then they have to spend extra time later trying to figure things out. Now, how to diagnose which problem that you have personally. And here's what I suggest. You can look through your schedule, or if you don't have a schedule, just keep track of the activities throughout the day. And you can either classify it as I'm consuming or I'm producing. So some examples of consumption activities would be things like watching YouTube videos. It could be stuff like reading, listening to audiobooks, or listening to podcasts. It could be attending lectures. Anything that's in the consumption category is essentially you acquiring information, you learning. This is the acquiring the knowledge, right? The consumption step. Production is anything that you're doing with knowledge. It's applying the knowledge. So this is writing. This is annotating. This is building. This is coding. This is doing practice problems with engineering. This is essentially anything that you do where you're creating something. That's production. And once you put it down on paper, then you kind of realize what you're kind of doing here and there. Or maybe you'll find that, okay, I have this consumption activity, but I've been going into it with a production mindset. I've been going into it saying, I need to understand right then and there, how do I solve the problems and get into the practice problems right then and there. So you're not giving your chance to consume. And so then based off of the problems that you have, now you can start making changes. If you have an overconsumption problem, you want to start thinking more critically about what it is you're actually consuming, right? Every piece of knowledge that you put in, it should have a for what, right? It's too easy to take in a lot of information, and sometimes the information contradicts each other, right? You get confused by having too much information. So you want to think about it like, okay, is there a purpose to why I'm doing this? Like, obviously the lecture is easy. I'm going to the lecture to understand the concept for the class. That's easy. But YouTube videos, it might be a little bit more harder to figure out, right? You have to be a little bit more selective because there's just so many YouTube videos. So it's a question of, okay, how useful is this one thing to me? And then overproduction is essentially the opposite question. Do I have the information, the knowledge to be able to produce effectively? Do I have a good enough understanding of the topics and the concepts so that I can produce effectively? And if the answer is no, then I need to go back to consumption. I need to learn. I need to re-watch the lecture. I need to re-watch a YouTube video. I need to consume more knowledge so that I can produce effectively, so that I'm not making the mistakes. I need to learn, essentially. And through that way, you can correct both sort of problems, and so then you have that nice balance between consumption and production. What I want you to take away, TLDR, right? The short of it is consumption and production, both of which are important. And if you can get the balance right in your school or in your work, if you can get that balance right, there's literally nothing you can't do. You will be far more effective and more efficient than you are now once you get that balance right. Anyways, good luck to you, and I'll see you in the next video.